Good to see y'all this morning. I feel like a chicken with its head cut off. We got babies popping out everywhere and moving gifts and stuff like that. And have a great meal today. Oh my goodness. And it feels good, right? It's going to feel better tomorrow. I don't know about that at 6 o'clock in the morning. I don't know about that. But especially tomorrow night. You know that being a veteran of South Georgia, I'm acclimated to South Georgia, meaning I'm not used to all this cold weather stuff. I at least with the 99-degree weather with a 50% humidity, I know what I'm dealing with, right? Oh, you get into this cold stuff, I don't know about y'all. 27 2 days in a row, my goodness. People be thinking the apocalypse has hit in November. Oh my goodness. Well, it's good to see y'all this morning. Before we get into our study, the way I'm looking at it, I think we might have about 2 weeks left in Deuteronomy, and then our brother Chip below is going to take over Joshua. He's going to lead us into the promised land. All right. Oh, man. There we go. All right, if y'all will pray with me before we get into our study. Heavenly Father, we are grateful for another day, Lord, just all the many things that you bless us with. We're grateful, Lord, that today is our family day, and we're grateful that after our worship service today that we can go next door and that we can share a meal together and we can fellowship and catch up and just see how things are going in our lives, Lord. We understand in the first century, Lord, that they were very close-knit. They had to be, and Lord, we just ask that we can do the same thing, that we can build those relationships, Lord, with our brothers and our sisters, and understand, Lord, that when we get to heaven, these are the individuals that are going to be with us. These are the individuals we're going to see, and that is our brethren, Lord. And we just ask you to help us to, with that thought in our minds, to be willing to reach out, to be able to talk to people about you, about your Son, and what they can have through Him. Just be with us and guide us each day, to be bold in our faith, Lord, to be people, and those who care about the souls of those that are out in this world. In your Son's name, amen. All right. So we are in Deuteronomy chapter 22, and last week we stopped. I believe we stopped. Our last topic was women entering into marriage, and this week we start here with the punishment of sexual sin. So the first one that's mentioned here, as we go through 22 through 30, if a man is found lying with a woman married to a husband, then both of them shall die. The man that lay with the woman, and the woman. So you shall put away evil from Israel. If a young woman who is a virgin is betrothed to a husband, and a man finds her in the city and lies with her, then you shall bring them both out of the gate of that city, and you shall stone them to death with stones. The young woman, because she did not cry out in the city, and the man, because he humbled his neighbor's wife. So you shall put away the evil from among you. If a man finds a betrothed young woman in the countryside, and the man forces her and lies with her, then only the man who lay with her shall die. But you shall do nothing to the young woman. There is in the young woman no sin deserving of death. For just as when a man rises against his neighbor and kills him, even so is this matter. For he found her in the countryside, and the betrothed young woman cried out, but there was no one to save her. If a man finds a young woman who is a virgin, who is not betrothed, and he seizes her and lies with her, and they are found out, then the man who lay with her shall give to the young woman's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he has humbled her, and he shall not be permitted to divorce her all his days. A man shall not take his father's wife, nor uncover his father's bed. All right, so a couple of things are mentioned here as far as punishment of sexual sins. First, we deal with the topic of adultery here. And so if the man and the woman are found guilty of adultery, what was the punishment? Death. Is that pretty serious? Pretty serious business here, y'all. And so when you think about that act, you think about there's a lot of things that go in with that. Our society, y'all believe that our society has somewhat normalized this? Like it's not a big deal, so to speak. Of course, like so many other things, right? But when you think about this very act, this has got to be amongst the greatest examples of selfishness that you can see. And so what do I mean by that? Why would you call adultery selfishness? Y'all are thinking about that food, ain't you? I mean, you think if someone commits adultery, okay, then obviously this person or both of you are married to someone, or at least one of you are married, correct? And so the greatest act of selfishness here is the fact that when, in the grand scheme of things, as you look at this situation, as you know you should walk away from whatever has developed here to lead to this point, you don't. Why? Because you're selfish. You don't think about your partner. If it's a person that's on the outside of a marriage that's trying to tempt or try to get someone to commit this act, that's single, that's a selfish individual in that you're trying to destroy a union between two people, okay? And so it's extremely selfish, all right? It's someone who puts their desires over the relationship. And we know when we're married, the two become what? The two become one, okay? And so with it, with that, it's the ultimate example of selfishness. And when we look at our society today, if you want to bridge that, this becoming such a common thing really speaks to really the view of marriage itself and where that is within society. And so if they were to be caught and found guilty of it, then both were to be put to death, okay? The whole goal of this and the purpose was to get evil, to remove evil from Israel. Now, if this were to happen, you just to let it go and not even deal with it at all, what's going to happen? Will it continue to happen? Will people start to look at marriage as a common thing? Of course. They will look at it as a common thing rather than the special union in which it is. And so that's why you have the harsh punishment. We've dealt with the idea of harsh punishment. Harsh punishment is intended to bring an understanding of the severity of the sin. And then there was the punishment of the engaged. If a woman was betrothed to a husband and a man committed fornication with her in the city, both of them were to be put to death. There was punishment of forcible rape. If a betrothed woman was forced to lie with a man in a field, only the man was to be put to death because he forced her. It was rape. Fornication of an unbetrothed virgin. Let's see. And then you've got incest. The law expressly condemned a man uncovering his father's wife, having sexual relations with her. Every bit of this that you see, all of these sexual sins that are condemned here, this is all done, y'all, to protect what? The marriage, protect the family, okay? We're starting to understand, we're starting to see how important the family is to society, right? And every step that's taken here is to protect the fabric of the family. Because, once again, if you protect the family unit, if you have strong families in society, you've got a strong society. You've got a strong community. You've got a strong country. You can literally look at American history and you look at the health of our country. Our country was the healthiest when we had strong families. When we had strong families. You can trace the downfall of American society and how it's diminished by the attacks on the American family. And y'all, that's not, you can some people say, oh, conspiracy theorists. You look at the time frame in which all these attacks hit, it's almost like it's coordinated. If you want to destroy America, you attack the family first. That's what you do. And it goes from there. So family is extremely important, and that's why you have heavy punishments that are implemented to protect the family. All right. So then we get into, in chapter 23 and verses 1 through 8, those forbidden from entering the congregation. These people were forbidden to enter the congregation of Israel. A man who had accidentally injured or intentionally castrated his private parts. This was to discourage the disfigurement of the body. The illicit son, or the way it's mentioned here, the bastard, could not enter the congregation even to the 10th generation. This ordinance was designed to prevent premarital sexual relations by the disgrace that it brought on the descendants. An Ammonite and a Moabite, because of the wickedness these two nations gave to Israel during their flight from Egypt, including the hiring of Balaam to curse Israel, their descendants were prohibited from being in the congregation of Israel for 10 generations. And then finally, an Edomite was forbidden to enter the congregation of Israel for 3 generations. And so these are the people who could not enter the congregation of Israel for very specific reasons, and God issued those reasons for that, or for those purposes. Really, when you look at within some of these, you have the idea of make good decisions, because bad decisions not only affect you, it affects those who come after you, correct? And so we see that here. Some people believe that, we make a bad decision, it only affects us. No, it does not. It affects a lot of other people. There's ripples to every decision, right? There's ripples. And we see that. So then we get into, in verses 9 through 14, the preservation of the purity of the camp. Several instructions were given to maintain the purity of the army when Israel went out to war. They were instructed to keep themselves from every wicked thing. If a man had an uncleanness by night, he was excluded from the camp. After washing himself at evening, he could re-enter the camp. The host was also instructed to designate a place outside the camp as a bathroom, quote-unquote, to relieve oneself. Every man was to take a paddle to be used for burying his excrement. So with that, now let's get into these ways, dealings with different other issues. So, runaway slaves, verses 23, verses 15 and 16. You shall not give back to his master the slave who has escaped from his master to you. He may dwell with you in your midst in the place which he chooses. Within one of your gates, where it seems best to you, you shall not oppress him. And so if an Israelite was not to deliver a runaway slave and to his master, this was more probably a foreign slave. He could dwell with them in whatever place he chose, and the Israelites were not to oppress him. And so with that, I had a thought, y'all, and then I lost it. If it comes back to me, I'll come back. But I had a thought and I lost it. We'll keep moving. 17 and 18. There shall be no ritual harlot of the daughters of Israel, or a perverted one of the sons of Israel. You shall not bring the wages of a harlot or the price of a dog to the house of the Lord your God, for any vowed offering, for both of these are an abomination to the Lord your God. And so Israel was not to tolerate any kind of harlot, any kind of sodomites in their midst. The law required that they be put to death, okay? Specifically, the law forbade the hire. Basically, you're paying, basically prostitution here. And so with that, this was something that, again, would be something that could destroy the family, because if you allow this practice out in society, are you just going to have single people affected by this? No, if it's out there in society, you're likely to have married individuals being enticed by this, correct? And so once again, a protection of the family. And this is something in society, if you want to look at what's the positives of this, there's not a whole lot of positives when you get into that situation, correct? There's nothing positive you can take from that. And so God says, do not do this. Take this away. So then we get into the obligations of citizenship at the very back. as we close 23 out. You shall not charge interest to your brother, interest on money or food or anything that is lent out at interest. To a foreigner you may charge interest, but to your brother you shall not charge interest, that the Lord your God may bless you in all which you have set your hand in, the land which you are entering to possess. When you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay to pay it, for the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and it would be a sin to you. But if you abstain from vowing, it shall be a sin to you. That which has gone from your lips you shall keep and perform, for you voluntarily vow to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth. When you come into your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat and fill your fill of grapes at your pleasure, but you shall not put any in your container. When you come into your neighbor's standing grain, you shall pluck the heads with your hand, but you shall not use a sickle on your neighbor's standing grain. So with it, we look at obligations of citizenship. So what does it mean to be a citizen? Okay. You're part of a country. Do we have random citizens of various countries throughout the world? Can we be a citizen of every country in the world? Can I take a flight to South Africa right now and boom, I'm a citizen? No, there's a process, right? If I wanted to do that, I could file the paperwork, right? And it's a long process. And some countries might even say, sorry, brother, no go. My point is this. Being a citizen, there's a difference between a citizen and a non-citizen. Do we all agree about that? Okay. Should there be certain privileges of citizens? Okay. Should non-citizens have the same privileges of the citizens? You can trace this, y'all, all the way back to the point that we're talking about. All the way through the Greeks, who had very, very rigid expectations as far as citizens and non-citizens, okay? The point is, the idea of citizenship has always been around. It's nothing new, okay? And there is an expectation there that some benefits are conferred to citizens, whereas they're not conferred to people who are not citizens. Does that make sense? It's hilarious to me that we get into we hear all these pundits and stuff talk about this. Within American society today, we have this large argument about what rights and privileges and benefits and this and that should be given to citizens, and which ones should not. Which ones should be given to non-citizens? Well, every other country in the world differentiates citizens from non-citizens. And I'm sorry, I'm just hot. And so with that, within the idea of citizenship here, he says a couple of things. First, he talks about lending to a neighbor. The law prohibited the charging of interest to a neighbor when lending him money or any other thing. The law permitted the charging of interest to non-Israelites. So here you see a difference between how we approach citizens and non-citizens. Okay. Now, are we to take advantage of people? Is that a Christian virtue? Not at all. But there is a difference here. Sometimes society just makes you shake your head. And this is not political, what I'm about to say, y'all. It's not meant this way. To me, this is common sense. When we hear people in society argue about the fact that someone can be in a country illegally, all right, and there's absolutely no distinction between citizens and non-citizens, y'all, it makes me scratch my head, because that's a special dose of foolishness. There is laws here, correct? There's something that distinguishes between the two. There was an obligation to pay vows. The law required that a person pay his vows. Failure to pay a vow was a sin. Eating in a neighbor's field. A man traveling in Israel was permitted to eat from the neighbor's field as he journeyed, just as Jesus did. We see that in Matthew 12, 1 through 9. And so what's the whole idea here? The idea here is that there's a difference between citizens and non-citizens, how you deal with foreigners and citizens. And then there's also an idea of just be good to people as well, as we see the man traveling, okay? If he's traveling, let him partake of what you got. Let him, he said, don't take a sickle, but let him pluck through the grain of what you got. And that's just being a good person. And so does that tie in, y'all, to what we read about in Mark 12:31, where Jesus said, love God and love who? Your neighbor. Look out for your neighbor. But there is a difference there. So here we go. So let's get into lesson 10, regulating divorce. 24, when a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some uncleanness in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house. When she has departed from his house and goes and becomes another man's wife, if the latter husband detests her and writes her certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house, or if the latter husband dies who took her as a wife, then her former husband who divorced her must not take her back to be his wife after she has been defiled. For that is an abomination before the Lord, and you shall not bring sin on the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. And so with that, this regulation regarding divorce here is understood in with what Jesus says in Matthew 19 and verses 1 through 9. And over in Matthew 19, let me get over there. Matthew 19, he says, now it came to pass when Jesus had finished these sayings that he departed from Galilee and came to the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. And great multitudes followed him, and he healed them there. The Pharisees also came to him, testing him and saying to him, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for just any reason? Now there's the question, y'all. If you study the Gospels, what do you always see these people doing? They're either criticizing him, correct? Or they're rejecting him, or they're accusing him, or they're what? They're trying to trap him. They're going to question him. So here we go. One more. You would have thought, y'all, that they would have learned by now, correct? They just don't. And he answered and said to them, have you not read that he who made them at the beginning made them male and female? And said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. And they said to him, what then did Moses command to give a certificate of divorce and to put her away? And he said, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, permitted you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another, commits adultery. And whoever marries her who is divorced commits adultery. And so with this, he talks and he adds it because this divorce, certificate of divorce was given because of the hardness of men's hearts. The abuses of marriage, y'all, you can see that throughout the Old Testament in polygamy, within concubines, and easy divorce there and remarriage, as men began to treat women as property to be used and disposed of. The Lord wrote legislation here for women's protection. That's why this was written. This is why this is stated there. And so with it, in the first three verses here, it talks about the contingency, and verse 4 states the legislation. So the contingency of this was threefold. One, if a man decides to divorce his wife because of some uncleanness. Two, if he has given her a writing of divorce and sent her out of the home. And then three, if she has married someone else who died or divorced her. And so the conclusion of this, he may not take her again to be his wife. The reason for the prohibition of their being remarried was this: she is defiled. And so the law here provided restraints to sins related to divorce and remarriage. One, it limited the grounds of divorce to uncleanness. In other words, he made it more difficult just to simply get out. And that's one thing we see in American society today, y'all, is divorce rates have went up exponentially, especially since the 70s or maybe the late 60s with the Great Society when it made divorce laws easier before, y'all. And I'm sure some of y'all can remember this. Within divorce laws, if you wanted to get a divorce, you had to actually prove if there was adultery or whatever it is. You had to actually go prove that to a judge. It wasn't simply, well, we just don't get along anymore. Well, here's the thing, y'all. My grandmother, my grandfather used to tell me all the time. He would take me fishing. There's a lot of times they didn't agree because they would tell me about it, or I would hear them disagreeing. If you've been married, do you get along all the time? Are there some days where it's, maybe you're ready to grab the pillow and put it over their face? Maybe that's a stretch. But are there some days that are tougher than others? Yeah. But what do? You keep moving forward, right? Just because you disagree, that doesn't disqualify the love you should have for that other person, correct? It just means you're people and you're going to disagree. All right? We see that. And that's one of the biggest issues that we see here. He limits it to uncleanness. Why? Because I'm taking away, every other excuse that you can try to find. And that's the problem we have in our society is, number one, we don't really respect the institute of marriage anymore the way we should. It is something that is just quickly grasped. It's something we just do. It's become a common thing. Do y'all agree or disagree? Because in my mind, if it doesn't work out, what can I do? I just get a divorce and go find somebody else, right? That's what I do. And that's unfortunate, y'all, because that's not the way God intended this. When I go to marry somebody, y'all, I got to think about that. I really need to think about this. In other words, as somebody once said, son, you better do your due diligence. And I'm like, what does that mean? It means you better figure out who that person is as much as you possibly can. Now, will you know everything about that person? No, but you better have a good idea, because when you're yoked together before God, man can say whatever man wants to say, but God's different entirely. Do y'all agree? Sometimes, y'all, what man says is okay is not what God says is okay. All right? Man can say that anybody can get married, right? That I don't care who you are, man and man, woman and woman, man and woman, binary, non-binary, I don't know, whatever the terms are now. There's a lot of them, and it keeps going. But my point is this. Man can say those things, but God says it's a man and a woman. And this is it. God's thoughts on it should be paramount. Should be paramount on these things. And so with the limited grounds of divorce here, the point is this. He's taking away the excuses and the ways in which you could get out of it. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. I think somebody told me once, he said, old preacher once told me, he said, you've heard that old adage about you give 50% and you give 50% and y'all get 100? I said, yep. He says, that's wrong. You give 100 and you give 100 because that's what you're going to need. All right. Okay. Yeah. And then in verses 5 through 9, we get into some various prohibitions. You see the exemption from the draft for newly married. We've covered that several times before. A newly married man was exempted from the draft for 1 year in order that the couple could have ample time to really submit their relationship together. Basically, you got a year to really build that foundation as a young family. And you need it too, don't you? Y'all think about that first year that you were married, when you weren't used to living with somebody, and boom, now they're there. You need about 3? Oh my goodness. You know, I was a bachelor for so long. I washed my clothes and, cleaned up the house or whatnot. And I figured out very quickly the way I did those things were not up to level. I don't know. We came to an understanding, But that's the way it is, right? You're trying to get used to one another. You're living together, and and within that is a lot of give and take. And you need some time to be able to get used to each other, because even though you're engaged to somebody and you're around them all the time, living with them is something completely different, right? That's completely different. My goodness, I didn't even realize. Allie told me one time I talk in my sleep. I didn't even realize that, y'all. Which then again, I ain't never had anybody sleeping beside me like that to hear it. So, anyway. And then there was exemption from taking the millstone as a pledge. The law prohibited the taking of a family's millstone as a pledge for a loan because of how indispensable for life the stone was. And then there's punishment for kidnapping. The man who stole any Israelite to sell into slavery was to be punished with death. Well, that's a pretty good. That's a really good one, right? I mean, if you kidnap somebody, guess what? You get caught, you die. You think that would prevent a lot of the possible kidnapping? Of course it would. And then there's an exhortation to obey the laws relating to leprosy. Now, leprosy, this would have been very, very important, because, y'all, leprosy, if it was not strictly adhered to, that could spread really fast. That could cause a lot of destruction within the group and within the community. And then we get into verses 10 through in chapter 24. Get back over to the Old Testament. I'm still in Matthew. In chapter 24, in verses 10 through 15, we get to talking about warnings against oppressing the poor. Now, Jesus said the poor would always be amongst us, right? He said that you'll always have them with you. And so in verse 10, when you lend your brother anything, you shall not go into his house to get his pledge. You shall stand outside, and the man to whom you lend shall bring the pledge out to you. And if the man is poor, you shall not keep his pledge overnight. You shall in any case return the pledge to him again when the sun goes down, that he may sleep in his own garment and bless you, and it shall be righteousness to you before the Lord your God. You shall not oppress a hired servant who is poor and needy, whether one of your brethren or one of the aliens in the land within your gates. Each day you shall give him his wages, and not let the sun go down on it, for he is poor and has set his heart on it, lest he cry out against you to the Lord and be sin to you. And so the law here forbade any conduct which might oppress the poor, destroy his own self-respect. The lender who demanded a pledge could not enter the poor person's house to take the pledge. He had to stand outside and ask for it. Now, why do you think that? Why is that given here? Why could he not go into the house and just take it? What is this affording? What is this giving to the individual that is poor, that is not as blessed as the other? What is this still giving him? As dignity, okay? He's still allowing for self-respect and dignity. Y'all, do you need dignity and self-respect to get back up on your feet? I mean, you think about it. If you just hammer people when they're down, and you just keep hammering them, how tough is it going to be to get up? Okay? So he's not saying that there's not any responsibility here. He's just dealing with the method and the means in which this could be dealt with. Afford that other person dignity and self-respect. Y'all, that's just caring about your neighbor. If I owe Griff some money, right? And y'all, I've learned over the years, just don't even lend money, just give it to them. That's what my grandfather once told me. He said, unless it's a lot of money, if it's this or that, just let them have it, because it just, it's less of a headache. But if I owed him a bunch of money, right? The way Griff handles that, he can still treat me in a way in which still affords me respect, right? and even if I'm late with the payment, y'all, there's methods in which I would say go to that person and try to reconcile the situation. And if they won't, then you have to have a little bit of a different discussion with that, right? But we don't have to be so over the top destructive in how we handle those situations. Y'all's thoughts? That's a good one right there. That is true. That is true. You want people to leave you alone and not bother you anymore, you give them some money. That's right. Oh, I'm sorry, loan it. Yeah, yes, you loan it. Loan it. That is true. That is true. That is true. That's amazing how that does work. I've got family y'all ain't heard about from a long time. You know why? Because I gave them some money. The pledge had to be returned at the end of each working day, especially if it was the man's garment. The regulations protecting the poor extended to the hired servant and the stranger, the non-Israelite who dwelt among them. The employer was required to pay the laborer at the end of the day. And so then we get, in verses 16 through 18, warnings about injustice. In administering justice, every person was responsible for his own sin. The weak, such as a stranger, fatherless, widows, were to be given the same justice as the strong were. The law forbade oppressing the weak. So, number one, we're all responsible for our own sin, correct? You're responsible for your own decisions, okay? At the end of the day, someone can tell me to do something, someone can urge me to do something, but who makes the decision? I do. I do. You know, I had a friend of mine that made a lot of poor decisions in one day. He decided to jump in his car, left his license at home, left his insurance card at home, didn't have any shoes on, ran a red light, and was speeding in Remerton. So, yeah. No, the officer, believe it or not, the officer felt so sorry for the fact that I think the amount of charges just blew his mind up a little bit, and he told him to go right straight back home, get his shoes on first, and find his license and everything else, and not to speed anymore. And I think it was through a school zone too, I think. So, anyway, he was very fortunate. But one thing that sticks out in my mind is as my friend tried to not so much beg, but try to speak about ignorance. The officer told him, "There's no." How did he phrase it? Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Okay, ignorance of the law is no excuse. And really, y'all, whenever we make our decisions, regardless of the circumstances, those are our decisions. And so we're accountable for ourselves with that. Now, what he speaks to here, he talks about the justice system or the administering of justice, that it does not oppose or oppress the weak. In other words, what he's talking about here is having a justice system that works the same for everybody, that there's no two-tier system, okay? How important is that, y'all? How important is it to have a justice system that's the same for everybody? So what's the consequences if you don't have one? If you have a justice system that treats this group this way and treats everyone else this way, what does that do? Does it disenfranchise people? Does that lead people to maybe not feel that, does it segment society? Does it crack the foundations of the country? Yes, it does. Does your faith in government go way down? Does your trust in government go way down? Absolutely. And so with that, you've got to have a system, y'all, that is the same no matter what. Now, when we look at man's government, the institution that he created, does that happen? Do we have 2 tiers or 3 tiers systems of justices when man creates something? Of course you do. Of course you do. You look at the world today. Excuse me. There's people that do things and they never get in trouble. And I'm like, man, if I don't pay my taxes, they on my doorstep on January the 2nd, right? Do what? Yeah, throwing your stuff outside. The only reason they wouldn't have been there on January 1st is because they're off, you know? But it makes you not trust your political institutions. Now, you look at God. Is God a respecter of persons? Not at all. Not at all. He's going to hold the same standard for me as he's going to hold for Chip, as he's going to hold for George W. Bush, Mahatma Gandhi, or whoever else. Okay? That's his standard. And that's what he's going to hold. Now, when I look at that, can I trust in a God that will not be impartial? Of course I can. I can trust in that God. That is stability. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant that he will be. I'm sorry. Yeah, that he will not be impartial. He's going to have the same standard towards everybody. Okay? I don't care who you are. I'm sorry. I apologize. He's going to have the same standard regardless. And that's something I can trust in, because that I know can't be corrupted, right? Man can corrupt it. God's not going to corrupt it. Because if he corrupts it, then he's what? He's a liar. And can God be a liar and be God? Not at all. So that's just what it is. So that's important there. And then he speaks to helping the poor in verses 19 through 22. The Lord required that the gleanings of the field be left for the poor. In harvesting a crop, if the laborers forgot a sheaf and left it in the field, the poor, strangers, fatherless, widows were given that sheaf. When the olive trees and vineyards were picked, what was left after the picking was for the poor. This benevolent treatment of the poor should be done in remembrance of Israel's suffering in Egypt. And so with that, help those that are in tough situations, right? Help those that are dealing with these circumstances. Leave them something, okay? This is loving your neighbor. That's what this is. This is what it looks like, okay? Do good for people, okay? Do good. Y'all, there's a lot of ways you can tear people down. There's a lot of ways you can be destructive towards others, right? We see that, right, every single day. God calls us to do good, to be those people. And here's an example of it. Sometimes we overlook how important this really is, all right? How much of a blessing was this on those individuals? On the poor, on the widows, on the fatherless, on those individuals that maybe were on the outskirts, so to speak. How much of a blessing would this be for an individual? It's an incredible blessing, especially if you ain't got food, right? I mean, that's a tremendous blessing. With what Kurt and Barbara, with what they do with the food bank. You think that's a blessing for individuals? Amen, it is. Especially right now, right? It's all the time, but especially what we're seeing right now. I mean, my goodness, there's a lot of people, sometimes, y'all, we're blessed, and sometimes we forget that there's some people out there that are not as blessed as we are. And so if we can help, that can make such an impact on their lives, and that's what God would have us to do. And then finally, the last thing he gets to here is corporal punishment. The punishment for crimes which did not demand capital punishment was a beating. The man judged guilty of a crime was beaten while he laid on the ground. No more than 40 stripes could be given to him, lest his brother seem vile unto him. Well, my goodness, 40 stripes, buddy. I might would have been a little upset at 2. I don't think you'd have to get up to 40 for me to have an issue. But y'all, what is this about? What's the purpose of punishment? What's the purpose of correction? That's right. Make sure that there's consequences for this. Don't do this, right? Don't do this. Y'all, when I got my whippings, I call them beatings, but they're whippings. Whenever I got that, the point was you did something wrong. You made a poor choice. that either was going to hurt yourself or hurt someone else, right? Don't do this again. And by the way, here's how you remember not to do this again. Because if it happens again, you're going to get this again. You know how many times I did the same thing over and over and over again? Not many times. Because as Scripture said, you know, my father and everyone else that was on that type of patrol on me, you know, they did not spare the rod, okay? And some of those lessons I still to this day remember because correction was there. Now, I didn't like it at the time. What kid does? But it taught me a lesson, and that's the purpose of punishment, to teach us that this is wrong. Do not do this. There's a better way, and that's the purpose of it. All right, so with that being said, our time is up. Thank you so much. We will pick up with not muzzling the ox. I'll let you read into that what you will. All right.
morning, everybody.